I stood near the edge, drink in hand, watching my sister hold court like a queen in a glass tower. Brooke was radiant. She always was. 30% reduction in ops expenses just this quarter, someone marveled, swirling his whiskey. Brooke grinned. Well, I don't like to brag, but she did. She always did. I sipped my drink, cold Prosecco, still bubbling, still full of silence. She hadn't seen me yet, or maybe she had, and was pretending not to. Both were Brooke's specialty. Either way, I was invisible again, like I'd been most of my life. Still, I watched her work the crowd, the firm's logo gleaming behind her on a banner like a crown seal. And then, her eyes locked on mine. It was subtle. Just a flick of recognition, a flash of something that looked almost like surprise. And then, the smile twisted just slightly. "Liv!" she called out, loud enough to cut through conversation, even music. "Wow, still tagging along to corporate events? You really need to get a life." There was a beat, half a second, where the rooftop stilled. I felt it in my chest. A few polite laughs scattered through the circle, mostly awkward. One guy coughed into his drink. I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when something's funny. The other kind. The kind you use to keep everything exactly where it needs to be. Behind your teeth, behind your ribs, behind the tight line of your jaw. "Good to see you too, Brooke," I said, as if I hadn't felt that comment like a blade. She turned back to her audience like nothing had happened, like I was a breeze that had just passed through. And just like that, I became background again, a shadow clinging to her spotlight. But I didn't move. Not an inch. I let the moment breathe, let it land, let her laughter echo, just a little too loud against the brick wall behind her. Someone nearby, I think it was the HR director, gave me a sympathetic glance. I didn't return it. Sympathy, I could do without. Because here's the thing, Brooke thought this party was hers, that all of this, the success, the praise, the clinking of glasses, belonged to her alone. She didn't know. She didn't know the system that had saved their department from budget collapse this year, the one that had cut those expenses she kept bragging about. I built it, quietly, under a contract, no fanfare, no spotlight. She didn't know my name was on the documents in the HR files, that her department was paying me $15,000 a month to keep their operations running like a dream. But I did, so I stood there, still smiling, still sipping. And beneath the surface, where Brooke couldn't see, something inside me started to shift. Not rage, not even sadness, something quieter. Something that felt a lot like power, and she hadn't even noticed it yet. 6 hours earlier, I was sitting cross-legged on the edge of my bed, staring at the invitation like it might blink first. Cream card stock, gold foil lettering. A rooftop soiree in downtown Chicago, hosted by a firm I technically worked for, even if no one, least of all Brooke, seemed to know that. Or maybe she knew, and just chose not to connect the dots. I held the envelope in one hand, turning it over slowly, as if the answer would rise from the paper like steam. Across the room, my phone buzzed with a reminder. 6:45 p.m., Brooke's event, Hotel Talcott Rooftop. I could have ignored it. Could have stayed home in my softest socks with takeout and a crime documentary playing in the background. But I didn't. Instead, I opened my top drawer and pulled out the pay stub I'd folded in half weeks ago. It was already soft around the edges from being handled too many times. I unfolded it carefully and traced my name, Olivia Grant, printed in clean black ink beside the words, "Consultant retainer fee, $15,000. It was real. It was mine, and Brooke had no idea. She thought she was the architect of her company's turnaround, the face of streamlined efficiency. But beneath the surface, it was my framework doing the heavy lifting, the digital infrastructure I'd designed over 2 sleepless months that now powered their internal systems like a quiet engine. They'd brought me on through a partner agency. Confidential. No meetings, no office politics, just results, clean, effective, invisible. It suited me, mostly. But tonight, I wasn't sure I wanted to be invisible. My apartment was silent, sun filtering through minimalist curtains in golden slats across the hardwood. I liked this space, the calm, deliberate order of it. Books arranged by color, a single orchid blooming defiantly by the window. Everything here had a reason, a place, unlike Brooke's world, where flash replaced function and names carried more weight than numbers ever did. I moved to the desk and pulled up the last deployment report. My initials were there, buried in metadata, proof of the system's final integration. I'd even caught a last-minute error in their HR dashboard that would have tanked the Q2 audit. No credit, no applause, just the silent knowledge that I'd saved them from themselves. I wasn't bitter, at least I told myself that. I pressed my fingers to my temple and closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the stillness. This wasn't new. Brooke had always been the loud one, the star. In childhood, she was the ballerina on stage, while I helped sew her recital costumes. At family dinners, she recounted wins while I quietly cleared the plates. Being unseen had become a kind of second skin, soft, unremarkable, impossible to catch light. But lately, I'd started to wonder what it would feel like to let that skin peel away. I got up, crossed to my closet, and ran a hand over a sleek black dress I hadn't worn in over a year. Tailored, understated. Power, whispered rather than shouted. I dressed slowly, brushing out my hair until it fell in soft waves, slipping on the gold studs I'd bought with my first contract payment. I didn't need anyone to tell me I looked good. I just needed to feel it, for me. By the time I zipped the last inch of the dress, the sun had dipped low behind the skyline. I looked at myself in the mirror. Not dazzling, not fragile, just ready. I slid the pay stub into a slim envelope and tucked it inside my bag. Not because I planned to show anyone, just as a reminder, a quiet kind of armor. And when the elevator doors finally opened onto the rooftop later that night, I stepped out into Brooke's world. Calm, polished, invisible, no more. She thought I was just tagging along, but I built the path she was dancing on. The wind had softened by the time the speeches paused, and the laughter swelled again, breaking into little bubbles across the rooftop. Warm light spilled from the cocktail bar, painting everyone in flattering amber tones. I drifted along the edge of it all, half listening, half fading. Not quite part of the crowd, but not outside of it either. Brooke was holding court again, perched on a low velvet bench, surrounded by a cluster of executives in tailored suits and department heads clutching chilled flutes. The automation protocols really let us refocus the budget, one of them said, eyebrows raised in admiration. Another chimed in. I mean, you cut redundancy without touching headcount. That's surgical. Brooke nodded sagely, lips glossed, chin high like she'd planned it all herself. We just had to optimize the core systems, you know? Push for modular design. Something scalable and resilient. I nearly choked on my Prosecco. She didn't even know what half those words meant in that context. Modular design? Resilient systems? Those weren't just buzzwords from some business podcast. They were the exact framework terms from my own architecture. Proprietary language. I'd built the internal naming system for the back-end modules myself. And here they were, floating from her mouth like confetti, like she'd dreamed them up in a vision board session over oat milk lattes. I smiled, not bitterly, not even sadly, just. With this deep, quiet awareness. She really didn't know. It was almost surreal, watching your own work become someone else's applause. Hearing pieces of your private vocabulary parroted back at you like echoes from a house you used to live in. One man leaned in, eyes wide. I've worked with 3 firms in the past 5 years. No one's achieved this kind of real-time analytics transition without a major vendor overhaul. How'd you manage it? Brooke tossed her hair, her smile flawless. You just have to see the whole picture. Strategic depth, not just surface efficiency. I nearly laughed out loud. Strategic depth had been the exact term I'd used in my first proposal slide deck, page 4. Underlined. There was a strange comfort in it, honestly, watching her revel in the light, not realizing it was bouncing off something I built. I sipped again and let the irony settle on my tongue like citrus. Sharp, but cleansing. Every now and then, someone would glance my way, a subtle look, a curiosity, maybe wondering who I was, maybe noticing how intently I listened, how I never asked questions, just let the conversation play out, like a familiar song, remixed with a different vocalist. I felt like a ghost composer at her own concert. It didn't hurt. Not really. If anything, it affirmed something I hadn't dared to believe until recently, that my work spoke louder than Brooke ever could, that I didn't need a title to matter. My value was coded into their systems, stitched into their quarterly reports, living under their praise like a quiet heartbeat. Brooke might have been the face, but I was the function. And sooner or later, someone was going to notice the fingerprints I'd left behind. For now, I let her have the spotlight, but even stars don't shine forever. The speeches started just after sunset, when the city skyline behind us blushed with twilight and the rooftop lights blinked on like tiny stars. People shifted, turning toward the makeshift podium near the bar. The department head, tall, silver-haired, the kind of man whose laugh lines looked permanently etched from years of well-timed charm, tapped his glass with a spoon. "All right, everyone," he called, his voice smooth and commanding. "Let's raise a glass to the woman who helped us not only survive this year's chaos, but somehow come out ahead." A ripple of cheers moved through the crowd. Brooke stepped forward, all white teeth and radiant confidence. Her heels clicked with practiced poise. He continued, one hand gesturing toward her like a proud father. "Brooke has been instrumental in streamlining our internal ops. Between her intuition and her tenacity, we've redefined efficiency." She gave a humble little shrug, the kind designed to look modest while still soaking in the applause. "But," he added with a smile, "as any good strategist will tell you, behind every operational miracle, there's someone quietly working the magic under the hood." He turned, searching the crowd. My heart didn't race. Not exactly, but I felt something tighten. A slow, precise draw of breath. "I also want to give a quick shout-out to the consultant who helped us architect the transition," he said, "a systems whiz who saved our budget more than once during rollout. Everyone, please thank Olivia Grant, our back-end backbone this year." He smiled. It was polite, almost offhand, but Brooke's face froze. She hadn't seen me clearly before. Not really, just a shadow at the edge of the party, a +1 of circumstance. But now her eyes snapped to mine with surgical clarity, narrowing as if trying to make sense of something that shouldn't be possible. Grant. She knew my last name, of course, but she'd never made the connection, never imagined I might be more than the quiet sister who freelanced in tech or something. Her smile stayed fixed, but her eyes? They flickered. There it was. That sliver of understanding carving its way through her certainty like a crack in glass. The guests applauded, scattered and polite. A few turned to look at me, nodding or smiling vaguely. I gave a small, professional wave, lifting my glass just slightly. I didn't step forward, didn't speak. I didn't need to. Brooke's gaze lingered on me too long, a beat past what would have been natural. Behind her perfect posture, something shifted. The mask faltered, just for a second, and I saw it. The moment she realized that all those buzzwords, all those glowing compliments about her system, the metrics she'd been praised for parroting, they weren't hers, they were mine. She didn't speak, just turned back to the crowd as the speeches continued, but her body betrayed her. A tiny stiffening in her shoulders, a barely there pause before she laughed at the next joke. I didn't gloat, I didn't flinch. I just stood there, sipping my drink while the skyline shimmered behind us and the ground beneath her pedestal began, quietly, gently, to shift. Recognition comes in waves, and hers had only just begun to rise. It didn't take long. Barely 10 minutes after the speeches wrapped, Brooke appeared at my side with that slow, practiced smile, the kind she'd used on teachers, boyfriends, and boardroom sharks alike. But I could see the effort behind it now, like a glass window with a hairline crack. "Liv," she said sweetly, touching my arm like we were close. "Walk with me?" I followed her toward the balcony edge, where the noise dulled and the city stretched out below, like a stage waiting for someone to fall off it. She turned her back to the party, folded her arms. "So," she began, still smiling, "you're consulting now? That's cute." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I'd heard that exact tone before. The one that sounds like a compliment but is built to cut. Her voice carried that high-gloss condescension she wore like perfume. That's cute. She was trying to find the ground again, to regain the upper hand. And I could've let her. But I didn't. Instead, I just looked at her. Really looked at her. My sister. Always so certain the world revolved around her ambition. Always assuming I'd orbit quietly around her glow. "I've always been doing the work," I said simply, letting each word settle. "Just not in the spotlight." Her mouth twitched, just slightly. That smile of hers couldn't quite hold. There it was again. The wobble. She didn't know what to say to that, because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't even confrontational. It was true. And truth doesn't need to shout. She blinked, shifting her weight. "So, you've been on the team this whole time?" I didn't answer the way she wanted me to. No timeline. No explanations. Just silence and that same calm gaze I'd been perfecting for years. Brooke hated silence. She always filled it. With noise, with charm, with the need to be right. And I let her sit in it. She cleared her throat, her eyes darting to the side, toward the party. "I mean, it's good, I guess. You're finally finding your lane." "Finding my lane?" That one nearly earned a laugh. But I just tilted my head, letting her words hang in the air between us. Absurd and weightless. She didn't know how much ground she'd already lost. Not just tonight, but over years, layer by layer. Brooke had spent a lifetime underestimating me, too wrapped up in her own spotlight to notice the shape of the shadows behind her. And now she realized the shadow had been doing the heavy lifting all along. A breeze rolled in off the lake, lifting strands of her perfectly waved hair. She shivered slightly and glanced down at the streetlights flickering far below. "Anyway," she said, adjusting the strap of her dress, "it's nice that we're working together now, in a way." She said it like a truce, but it felt more like a mask being reapplied, piece by piece. "Sure," I said softly, my voice steady. "Nice." But inside, I was already miles ahead, because Brooke still thought this was about family dynamics. She hadn't yet realized the system she stood on. It wasn't just mine. It had my name on the invoice. Later, as the party thinned and the rooftop lights flickered softer, a man in a crisp navy suit approached me with the ease of someone used to having answers. He wasn't part of Brooke's orbit. No lingering eye contact. No shallow praise. He moved like he saw through fluff, not toward it. "Olivia Grant?" he asked, holding out a hand. I nodded, accepting his firm grip. "I'm Marcus Leary," he said, CFO. Ah, so this was that Marcus, the one who signed the checks, approved contracts, and quietly kept the entire machine from grinding itself into chaos. "I just wanted to thank you," he continued. "We've had a lot of noise around here lately. High turnover, missed targets, departments cannibalizing their own budgets. But your system, it's clean, predictive, efficient." I smiled lightly. "That was the goal," he chuckled. "I know good work when I see it. I built 2 startups before this gig, nearly bled out on bad data." He sipped from a glass of something amber and expensive looking. Then he lowered his voice slightly, as if we were already allies. "I'll keep this quick," he said. "We've decided to formalize things. No more month-to-month invoicing." I raised an eyebrow, curious but careful. You'll be added to the payroll permanently, he said. Retainer contract, same rate. Your metrics are strong enough to roll out citywide. I want to expand what you've built across our other offices. I blinked once. That's generous. Earned, he replied easily. The board's already greenlit it, and, he added with a sly smile, it'll live under Brooke's division budget. Easier to track. Plus, that department owes you half its success anyway. There it was. Right there. The full circle. The irony settling with soft weight behind my collarbones. Brooke's department. The same one that hosted tonight's glittering little rooftop tribute to her brilliance. The same one where her name was a banner and mine barely a footnote. She was footing the bill for my retainer. She just didn't know it yet. I let out a small breath, more exhale than laugh. Thank you, Marcus. He nodded once, sharp and approving. We'll have the paperwork to you by Monday. And, Olivia, if you ever want to come in-house, my door's open. Then he was gone, swallowed back into the party. Another whisper in the chaos, leaving behind a truth that felt solid, unshakable. I leaned against the railing, letting the wind skim across my skin, and took a long sip of my drink. It didn't taste like victory. It tasted like justice. Slow, deliberate, earned. Below me, the city kept humming, unaware that somewhere above it all, a woman who had been written off, sidelined, and belittled had just been quietly woven into the company's foundation. And the person who underestimated her the most was now unknowingly funding her rise. It was sometime after the second round of champagne and before the DJ found his groove that I ended up near the fire pit with a few of Brooke's closest colleagues. The kind who always traveled in packs, immaculately dressed, designer shoes already swapped for flats no one talked about, drinks in hand like accessories. Brooke wasn't far, still floating between clusters of execs, but her eyes kept flicking over like she couldn't quite decide whether to call me over or ignore me entirely. I stayed put. The conversation around me was easy, loud enough to cover insecurities, fast enough to sound clever. So I told him, one of them, Callie maybe, was saying, either you give us more resources, or we start sending invoices to the IT team for emotional distress. Laughter rippled, light and pointed. Honestly, someone else chimed in, between salary bumps and the new tech, our overhead this year is insane. I mean, who's footing that? Brooke had just stepped close enough to hear when the third voice cut in, a man with a sharp jaw and a Rolex that probably had its own security detail. Bet Brooke's footing half the firm's new tech bill, he said with a smirk, elbowing her gently. More laughter. The kind people toss around when they're used to being above consequences. Brooke gave a polite chuckle, but her expression was already starting to crack. A flicker of confusion, maybe. And that's when I said it, just softly enough to turn heads. Close, actually, I murmured, swirling the last of my drink. Her division carries the contract. The words landed like a pin drop in velvet, quiet but pointed. They turned toward me almost in unison, the humor fading just slightly, like someone had dimmed the lights by a few notches. Even Brooke's laughter stopped short, like her brain was still parsing what I'd just said. One of them, Jason from Data Strategy, blinked. Wait, you mean your system is the one we've been running on since Q2? I just smiled. Brooke's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Her lips parted like she wanted to steer the conversation back, but there was nowhere to go. I assumed you were, with the consultant team? Callie asked slowly. I am, I said, still easy, still calm, just not in a cubicle. Jason let out a low whistle, eyebrows raised. Damn, you built the backbone? I could see them recalibrating in real time, watching me not as Brooke's sister, not as a +1 or a polite footnote, but as someone different. Someone who'd been quietly changing the game while no one was looking. It's always the quiet ones, Callie muttered, shaking her head with a grin. Figures. The fire crackled softly between us, and for once, the silence that followed didn't feel like exclusion. It felt like recognition. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. The air had already shifted. Across from me, Brooke's expression hardened. Not overtly, but enough. She was calculating now, trying to decide how much she'd missed, how many conversations had happened without her, how many decisions she hadn't known she was a part of, or wasn't. And me? I just stood there, serene in my little corner of the flame glow, letting her feel it. The weight of being on the outside looking in, the very position she'd spent a lifetime assigning to me. Only now, the glass was flipped, and she was the one seeing her reflection through it. Sometimes power isn't loud. Sometimes it just sits at the table quietly, until someone finally asks where the check is going. I was leaning against the bar when it happened. The rooftop was dimmer now, half the guests already trickling out with glowing skin and too many drinks in their systems. The music had softened, all velvet bass and low conversation. The evening was cooling into that familiar end-of-night lull, where true things start to leak through small cracks. Brooke was standing 10 feet away, laughing too brightly at something someone said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Not anymore. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then paused, brow furrowing. Whatever she saw made her step back slightly, away from the group, into the shadows near the wall. I saw the glow of the screen on her face, blue, white, and stark. Her finger moved, scrolling. Then it stopped. I watched her freeze. It was all in the details. The way her shoulders tensed, the slow blink, the way her other hand came up, just slightly, as if steadying herself. She read it again. I knew what it was before I saw it. She'd finally opened the payroll PDF from HR, the one labeled Updated Consultant Retainers Q2, Q4. The one that listed, very clearly, Olivia Grant, Systems Design Consultant, $15,000 per month, budget code. Brooke M. Ops Division. She stared at it like it had punched her in the stomach. Her thumb hovered over the screen, not scrolling now. Just stuck. I didn't move. I didn't look away. Then, slowly, her head lifted, and our eyes locked. There it was. The moment. No more ambiguity. No more polite assumptions or convenient blanks. Brooke's mouth opened, just a fraction, her lips forming the shape of a question she suddenly didn't know how to ask. "You're on my budget?" she said, voice barely above the music. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the rooftop like a snapped string. I walked toward her calmly, casually, letting the seconds breathe between us. When I reached her, I gave the smallest nod. "Yes," I said. "Since February." She blinked hard. "You've been billing my department for months? For the system you run. The one everyone's been praising tonight." She looked down at her phone again, like the numbers might have changed in the last 10 seconds. But they hadn't. They were still there. Clean, clinical, undeniable. The silence stretched. People nearby were starting to glance over. They could feel something shifting. Brooke didn't notice them. For once, she wasn't performing. Her voice dropped, like maybe she hoped I'd soften. "You never said anything. I wasn't asked." She swallowed. "You're making 15 grand a month?" The shock in her voice was real. Not anger. Not even jealousy, yet. Just disbelief, like someone had switched the rules of the game while she was playing. "And the contract lives under my name? Your department name," I clarified gently. "Line 4722. That one landed hard. I watched her process it. All those meetings, those budget updates she probably skimmed through, thinking they were just jargon. I hadn't hidden it. She just hadn't bothered to look. Brooke stared at the screen a moment longer, then slowly locked her phone and set it down beside her half-empty glass. Her face was pale under the string lights, but there was a heat rising in her expression. Not quite rage, not yet. Just the raw, unfiltered realization of being blindsided in the one arena she thought she ruled. "I didn't know," she said finally. "I didn't know it was you." I know. She looked up, searching my face. Why didn't you? I don't know. Tell me. I tilted my head slightly. Would it have mattered? She didn't answer. The music swelled behind us, the skyline glittering like it was watching. And in that moment, as she stood there trying to put the pieces together, the budget, the speeches, the quiet way the narrative had slipped through her fingers, I allowed myself something small, a smile. Not smug, not cruel, just true. And this time, it wasn't hidden behind anything, because Brooke finally saw the math for what it was. I wasn't under her shadow anymore. She was standing in mine. Brooke didn't speak right away. She turned back to the bar, both hands bracing the edge, like she needed something solid beneath her palms. Her glass sat untouched beside her phone, condensation slipping down its side, gathering in a slow, quiet pool. I could feel her thinking, calculating, scrambling for footing in a conversation she hadn't prepared for and for once couldn't direct. After a long pause, she straightened, smoothed her dress. And when she finally looked at me again, the mask had returned. Not all the way, but enough. Her voice, when it came, was casual, coated in sugar, sharpened beneath. Well, she said with a dry laugh, I guess I did open some doors for you after all. I didn't answer right away. She took that as permission to continue. I mean, my network, my department, my event, she added, gesturing toward the rooftop still buzzing behind us. If I hadn't pulled the right strings, none of this would have even happened. You wouldn't have gotten in front of the right people. She swirled her drink, gaze flicking out toward the skyline, as if she were offering me some kind of olive branch. One dipped in subtle arrogance and years of practiced deflection. I mean, come on, Liv, she said with a shrug. You wouldn't be where you are if I hadn't opened the door. I let the words hang there for a moment. Then I set my glass down slowly and met her eyes with a calm that wasn't rehearsed. It was lived. I stepped just a little closer, my voice quiet, not for secrecy, but for precision. You opened the door, I said, but I built the building. Brooke didn't flinch, but something in her expression shifted, the faintest flicker, like the light behind her eyes had caught on the truth of it. She wasn't the architect of this moment. She'd merely been standing in the lobby while I laid the foundation beneath her feet. I've been designing systems for 5 years, I said gently. While you were presenting quarterly reports, I was writing the algorithms that made them sparkle. You know how your division's dashboard updates in real time now? That was me. You know those budget savings you're so proud of? My model flagged the redundancies before they turned into losses. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. You didn't offer me an opportunity, I continued, still soft, still steady. You just didn't notice I was already in the room. There was no anger in my voice, only truth. For a second, we stood there. 2 women cut from the same cloth, but tailored into very different shapes. And then, slowly, Brooke picked up her phone. She didn't check it, didn't open that PDF again. She just held it like a lifeline she wasn't sure how to grip anymore. I didn't know, she said almost under her breath. I know, I said. And I meant it. Not just about the contract, not just about the work, about all of it. About the childhood praise that never reached my side of the table. About the years she thought of me as a quiet shadow, a harmless echo. About the ways she'd built her confidence around the assumption that I would always be smaller, quieter, a step behind. She'd opened the door, but I'd built the structure. And now, standing beside her on a rooftop she thought she owned, I wasn't just in the room, I was the foundation under it. People say recognition feels like a spotlight, but for me it felt more like the soft hum of a room shifting, chairs angling slightly in my direction, conversations pausing mid-sentence, hands reaching out instead of pulling away. I hadn't said much after my exchange with Brooke. I didn't need to. Whatever mask she'd worn earlier in the night had begun to slip for good. She retreated into small talk with the last of her colleagues, her laughter now quieter, more mechanical, a sound that didn't quite reach the corners of her mouth. Meanwhile, something else had started to happen. People began approaching me. A woman from operations, Megan, I think, stopped to ask about my system's cost models. The marketing VP handed me her card discreetly, whispering, "We've been trying to rebuild our analytics flow. I'd love to pick your brain sometime." Even the partner from the consultancy firm that subcontracted me came over, wine glass in hand, eyes sharp behind designer frames. "You've done more in 6 months than 2 full-time hires did in a year," he said. "You ever consider going internal? Your name's been in a few of our boardroom conversations lately." I smiled, politely, calmly, almost like I didn't notice the shift happening beneath my feet. But I did. It was subtle, like the way gravity adjusts when a storm is coming. Only this time, I was the one bringing the pressure, and not by force, just by presence. I started making my quiet goodbyes, shaking hands, thanking people who were suddenly looking at me like I mattered, not because of my last name, because of what I'd built. I was almost at the elevator when I heard her behind me, heels clicking too fast on the rooftop tile. Brooke. She looked composed on the surface, but her eyes were glassy, her mouth set just a little too tight. Her voice tried to play casual, but it cracked just enough to show the strain. "You're just leaving?" "I've said everything I needed to," I said gently. She stepped in front of the elevator doors, arms crossed like a shield. "So that's it? You dropped this on me in the middle of my event, and now you get to walk out like the hero?" I met her eyes, level and calm. "I didn't drop anything," I said. "I just stopped hiding what was already true." Her jaw clenched. "You blindsided me." "No," I said softly. "You overlooked me. There's a difference." The elevator chimed behind me. A soft, perfect sound. I stepped inside. She didn't follow, just stood there, arms folded, blinking, like she still hadn't figured out how everything had changed. And then, just before the doors began to slide shut, I looked at her one last time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward. I just said, evenly, "You always told me to stop clinging to successful people." I let that memory land between us. The years she said it half joking, the times it wasn't a joke at all. The doors began to close. "I didn't," I said. And then, softly, I became one. The silence that followed was instant. Final. The doors sealed shut. And Brooke's face, that stunned, speechless expression, was the last thing I saw as the elevator descended. It didn't feel like revenge. Not really. It felt like clarity, clean, sharp, and earned. As I stepped out onto the street and the cool air met my skin, I breathed deeper than I had in months. I didn't need anyone's applause. I didn't need to be louder. I just needed to be seen. And tonight, they finally did.